The regular Switch Joy-Cons are fine, but people are always looking for alternative ones to use, primarily ones that are larger and more comfortable for regular or large hands. And for a while, the main solution to this was Hori Split Pad Pro. But a new option was recently brought to my attention, which are these Joy-Cons from Binbach, which, by the way, there is some kind of energy out there that was making sure that a lot of people noticed them all at once, because
Binbach.
right after I ordered these, Spawnwave actually did a video on them, and I know Bob from Wolf Den is working on one right now that I think his video is going up tomorrow, so you're gonna have a few different opinions to look on for how these ones stack up. Which, by the way, both their channels are awesome, so make sure to check them out and subscribe, and, you know, if you haven't subscribed here either, you should do that here too, because, you know, we do cool stuff here. I like to think. But what I want to specifically focus on is how they compare to the Split Pad Pro, because really the biggest thing for me is just having something that's more comfortable to use with my Switch. Now, what's really interesting about these is that they go for the same MSRP as the Split Pad Pro at $50, but is a more fully featured Joy-Con. So we're gonna go over what these two have in common, what's different about them, and ultimately which one is a better fit for you. First off, let's talk about one of the biggest ways that these are an upgrade over regular Joy-Cons, their general increased size, shape, and comfort, which while they both aim at being larger Joy-Cons, there are some slight differences in how they're shaped. Specifically, the Hori Joy-Con does have a thinner side profile. It kind of has this almost edge that you can feel when you're holding it against your palm, whereas these Binbach ones have a more kind of rounded design to them that, at least for me, my palm actually doesn't fully rest in it. I kind of feel like almost a space open here, and I just grip it more along the sides. Over a prolonged period of time playing, I actually found that the split pad, over time, I did find the split pad actually was a little bit more comfortable for me. This isn't necessarily a situation of like, oh, this one's comfortable and this one's not. No, they're both big upgrades over the regular Switch. But for me personally, I did find the Hori to be just a bit better over very long periods of time. Next up, let's talk about buttons, sticks, all that good stuff. There's a lot of very large similarities here. A lot of the buttons and sticks on these two Joy-Cons feel very much the same. The front-facing buttons are nearly identical. The shoulders feel similar in terms of tension and how you press the button, although the shapes are a little bit different, with the Rgb Joy-Cons having a larger button in the front, while the back trigger on the Hori is a little more pronounced and feels slightly more trigger-like because it has that little kind of uplift on the back. Stick-wise, they are both very similar, but there are some minute differences that I think are worth pointing out. The Binbach controller has a more pronounced concave design on the stick head itself, which I do find feels a little bit better for keeping my thumb just on it, especially if I'm just moving around a lot. The tension on them are very similar. They both kind of occupy what I would say is sort of a medium-high level of tension, with the Binbach Joy-Con being just a little more resistance. One thing that is in favor for the Binbach on the sticks is that not only is this a little RGB light around the stick itself, but it also does have less friction compared to the Hori. Neither of them is awful or uncomfortable, but if you spend time, if you play any kind of games where you're spinning the stick a lot, you will feel a little bit of texture and kind of just rubbing against the sides of the plastic on the Hori, whereas this feels a lot more fluid. As far as some of the auxiliary buttons go, like the plus, minus, capture, and home buttons, this is actually one of the areas where they're the most different, with the Hori having these very soft touch buttons that are made of a softer plastic, while the Binbach has these flat, hard plastic ones that are clicky. We'll also get to some of these special functions and features of these controllers soon, but something else worth pointing out is that the buttons used for these features, like Turbo and Assign, are located on the front bottom of the Hori Split Pad Pro, whereas the Binbach has smaller buttons located on the back side of the controller. Either way, the buttons are actually out of the way to where you're not going to accidentally press them when you don't want to. The Binbach does hide theirs a little more, so if you don't like the look of having those buttons on the front of the controller, that can be an upside for you. Before we move on to special features, one last button I want to compare, and this is actually where the Binbach, in my opinion, flat out loses, is the D-pad. I really don't like this D-pad. It's okay if you're just pressing a single direction at a time. If you have to hit up, down, left, right, whatever, it's fine. But any situation where you have to rely on rolling inputs, like say a fighting game, this is not good. It's kind of okay if you stick to the outer edges of it, but it sticks very easily, and you can end up pressing the whole pad down in a way that makes inputs a confusing mess. The D-pad on the Split Pad Pro is by no means the greatest D-pad in the world, but it gets the job done a lot better. One kind of addendum to the whole D-pad situation thing. Now, I didn't actually watch Spawnwave's video because I normally don't like watching videos and stuff that I myself am working on. I'm just really afraid of accidentally repeating something that someone else says. It's a thing I generally don't like doing, and I want to review a product without any kind of real preconceptions. But I was talking to someone who had seen the video, and when I was talking about my issues with the D-pad, they did mention, oh, well, in his video, he did a full teardown and found these weird stickers that if you remove, make the D-pad better, which I did discover in mine as well. After removing them, the D-pad does feel better. I still don't really love it. I like the Hori's D-pad better, but it is an improvement over how it's shipped in stock. Now, if you don't like the idea of opening something up and fixing it that way, this is definitely something you should keep in mind because it is going to be a problem unless you take that extra step. So when it comes to things like buttons, sticks, comfort, all that kind of good stuff, there's a lot of give and take between these two controllers, but where the Binbok really begins to pull ahead is when we talk about special features. Now, it offers the same base ones that the Split Pad Pro does. It has a turbo button for a rapid-fire press of a button of your choice, and a remappable button so that you can have something on the same side Joy-Con work as an auxiliary button choice right here, which is really handy for some titles. Outside of that, though, the really big deal is the fact that the Binbok is effectively a almost fully functional regular Joy-Con. The Split Pad Pro is a purely handheld only device. It only works when directly plugged into the Switch. It cannot be used wirelessly, whereas the Binbok can. Now, given the shape of this Joy-Con, I think there are some limitations to keep in mind. For instance, you could use this as a standalone Joy-Con sideways, which feels really, really weird. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but it is an option. And you can also use a Joy-Con in each hand wirelessly, which I will admit felt a lot better than I thought it would. I really thought that these large Joy-Cons would actually feel very clunky and weird without having a centerpiece connecting them, but it actually worked out okay. I still actually think I like regular Joy-Cons more when I'm using one in each hand. There's just something about how I'm able to hold each one kind of lazily in each hand that works out well, whereas the larger size of this I think is a little bit more of a detriment for that specific situation, but it does still work. Where it really shines, though, is when you use this little center connection piece to basically turn it into a regular Pro controller. One that's a little wider and maybe doesn't have the exact same layout as, say, a traditional Pro controller, but it still is much closer than, say, using a pair of Joy-Cons with the Joy-Con grip. Now, on top of being wireless, there are other features this has, like a regular Joy-Con that the Split Pad Pro does not. For instance, rumble. Now, the rumble is not the same level as the HD rumble in a Joy-Con, which is a more kind of refined one that allows for some very interesting feeling rumble features for specific games, but it is still at least a rumble feature that the Split Pad Pro does not have, and it is adjustable as well with some onboard controls, so you can make it something that is maybe just a soft rumble or a much more intense one if you like that. One of the biggest features it offers, missing from the Split Pad Pro, is also gyro control. So any game that involves having motion controls that you like to make use of, whether you're doing that in handheld mode or wirelessly with the controller setup as well, is something that this offers that you cannot get using the Split Pad. And of course, one of the last little standout interesting things about this is that it does feature an RGB ring around both of these sticks. It's not exactly full-blown Razer levels of insanity where there's all kinds of different programmable options, but you can swap between a number of different solid colors. You can use a rainbow mode, you can do a breathing mode that alternates between different colors. There's a couple light choices here that are all managed by clicking the stick with the different program buttons in the back in various combinations. One quick thing I think is worth pointing out about my Joy-Con that is a little weird is that while, like most unlicensed Joy-Cons, these ones allow you to charge by directly plugging into USB-C, they are also capable of charging while connected to the Switch and it's docked, just like a regular Joy-Con. However, in my personal case, only my right one does this. Now, I checked with other people who I know have these Joy-Cons or also working on reviews for them, and this seems to be a problem unique to the ones I received. So it is not a widespread issue necessarily, but it might be something worth checking out if you order these and grab them, just in case you end up needing to do a defective exchange. All said and done, which of these do I actually like more? It's actually kind of a weird situation, because if I'm being perfectly honest, for me personally, I actually see myself using the Hori Split Pad Pro a little more, but the reason for that is because doing what I do in YouTube, I'm a little spoiled by the fact that I have lots and lots and lots of controller options. When I'm playing the Switch in dock mode, I prefer using a Pro controller or similar thing like the SN30 Pro Plus, and that's the method I'm going to use. Really, when I'm looking into large Joy-Con options like this, I'm primarily focused on the concept of using them in handheld mode, which gets rid of a lot of the benefits the Binbok has outside of that gyro motion. Like I said before, the Hori does feel just a bit more comfortable for me personally. However, for most people out there, if you don't have a large number of controllers to choose from and you're really looking for something that can be an all-in-one solution, the Binbok is a really good one to look at, because this is something that's giving you the benefits of the Split Pad Pro, being something that is comfortable to use in handheld mode, while also offering some additional special features like gyro controls and rumble, and you can use it wirelessly with the little attachment to effectively be an additional Pro controller. Plus, I mean, come on, it's got little RGB lights. What's not to love about that? If, like me, you're really only primarily interested in doing handheld mode stuff and you don't necessarily care about gyro controls, the split pad is still, I think, a great option to go for. But considering all the additional things you can get out of it, the Binbok is definitely something I think a lot of people should strongly consider. One last little thing to touch on real quick, just something I think does matter for some people, aesthetics. The Binbok is currently only available in this all black design, aside from the RGB light, which is fine for most people out there. If you want something that has a little more variety or other colors, the split pad does have more options right now. Obviously, the one I'm holding is a special Pokemon design one that features Pikachu. They also have a Pac-Man design. They have some solid color options like red and blue. So if you care about that, the split pad has more choices there right now. Where the Binbok, if you don't care how things look, you got one choice, and it's really the only choice you need as far as something that works really well.